Eminent guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to everyone. I am Ravleen Sethi, Director at CareEdge Ratings and your MC for the evening. On behalf of CareEdge, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all on this momentous occasion. We are honored to have you all with us today in our flagship event, CareEdge Conversations. I would first like to request our MD and CEO, Mr. Mehul Pandey, and also our chief guest, Mr. V. Anantha Nageshwaran, to please come and be seated on dais. I would also request our MD and CEO to please present a token of our warm welcome and appreciation to him before we commence the formal proceedings of the event. Today, we gather here for a very special edition, one that looks ahead with optimism and purpose. The theme, the theme for this year's dialogue is Powering India's Growth, Shaping Tomorrow, a reflection of the nation's remarkable transformation journey and the collective responsibility we all share in sustaining that momentum. India today stands at the cusp of a defining decade, one marked by strong macroeconomic fundamentals, digital acceleration, and resilient domestic demand. Yet, as we power ahead, the conversation is equally about balance between growth and stability, innovation and inclusion, and also ambition and accountability. In this spirit of the meaningful dialogue, the CareEdge conversation continues to bring together the policymakers, industry leaders, economists, and thinkers to explore what truly derives the sustainable progress. We are deeply honored to have with us today Dr. V. Anantha Nageshwaran, the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, a visionary economist whose insights and perspectives continue to shape the nation's growth agenda. We're also delighted to be joined by eminent experts from across industries who will provide their perspective on this initiative. We hope this deliberation offers each one of you valuable insights to carry forward from today's event. Without further ado, let us commence the proceedings of this evening with our Managing Director and Group CEO of CareEdge Ratings, Mr. Mehul Pandya. Associated with CareEdge since the year 2000, Mr. Pandya has been instrumental in shaping the organization's growth journey, successfully incubating and nurturing the business in India and overseas. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together in welcoming Mr. Pandya to deliver the opening address.
Good evening, all of you. It's a great honor and privilege to have with us one of the most eminent personalities who has been shaping and articulating the landscape and the journey that our country as Viksit Bharat shall be taking in the years to come. We are also emboldened by the fact that when we approached Dr. Nageshwaran with the request to grace the occasion, without any hesitation, he backed us. It's a personal privilege, and on behalf of the organization and all of us present over here, I welcome him. For the last many years, our event, CareEdge Conversations, has been able to put in place some far reaching articulation of the thoughts and the roadmaps. We have had the honor of many eminent personalities gracing this thing, our event. And I'm 100% sure that today's address by Dr. Nageshwaran would be leaving us with a lot of clarity and thoughts that we, as the citizens of this country and corporate leaders, what we need to do as far as our contribution to Viksit Bharat is concerned. Let me just begin by articulating what has changed for India over the last many years, and principally over the last 10 to 13 years under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister. We have seen significant changes in the economy, policy making, regulatory approaches, and business environment. How exactly these things have changed? To my mind, I would like to emphasize on six major changes. First is the scale, the scope, and the diversification of Indian economy has changed. We are the fourth largest economy and poised to become the third largest in the next few years. The sectoral composition of the economy that has also changed, and it is more broad based now. We have a significant share of the services sector and no significant sectoral concentration. This is a big change which has happened. Another change that I would like to highlight is the fact that we have become a nation not just of savers, but as investors. There had been considerable focus as far as the bank deposits have been concerned as the principal source of the investments. But what we have witnessed that over a period of time, there has been more equity partnerships by the people in the country, principally through the mutual fund route. And it is estimated that for the first time, Indian DIIs, they own more Indian stocks than the FIIs. This is a big change which has happened and to an extent reflects the changing mindset as far as the people of the country is concerned. The third change which I like to highlight is significant investments have been put into the infrastructure sector, the creation and the modernization of infrastructure. And that is, this is across the sectors. It's not just limited to the road sector or the ports or the airports. It is across the sector, any sector of infrastructure. If any segment of infrastructure, if we are to pick up, there has been significant impetus by the government and which has, in a way, spurred the economic growth and created the necessary backbone for the businesses to flourish. When we ventured, rather became the first domestic rating institution to get into the global scale and the sovereign rating space through our 100% subsidiary CareEdge Global Ratings, which started operations from the IFSC GIFT City last October. One of the nuanced differentiation that we brought about was a focus on this parameter. What we convincingly believe is that gross fixed capital formation in the economy that lays the roadmap for the economy to flourish in the years to come. And we have seen what this kind of a thing can do when it comes to the Indian economy. Under the visionary leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, we have seen consistently high focus on infrastructure creation and the capital layout. This has been a remarkable change that has happened. Another aspect which I'd like to highlight, and as one of the few rating agencies globally also, to have been in operation since more than 3 decades. What we have witnessed is the corporate sector in India today is much, much stronger than what it was about a decade back. Apart from the lower investments into non productive aspects and a focus rather on using the cash flows for paring the debt, what we have witnessed is the leverage philosophy of the governance, the management that has changed. I credit partially this aspect to the IBC code, which was introduced some years back, that has instilled a significant financial discipline as far as the corporate sector is concerned, and which stands us in good stead when we witness the volatility in the global markets. The next big change, or rather a positive attribute for the Indian economy today, is the strength of the financial sector. The asset quality of the banks that has improved, and the structural interventions from the regulators, they have helped in terms of ensuring that the financial sector remains in good shape as we move forward. And the sixth point, as far as clearly identifiable change which has happened, is in the form of the presence of a vibrant international financial services center. What we believe is that for any growing economy, and that especially with our kind of a size, it was always a given thing in terms of one of the imperatives that a well functioning international financial services center has to be there. And with the IFSC established as a part of the GIFT City in Gandhinagar, what we are witnessing today are more than 409 companies, more than 25 banking units, 35 insurance companies, 125 AIFs, and 2 international stock exchanges operating over there. The focus on the diversification beyond the traditional financial services sector is also underway. And again, credit to the finance ministry and the leadership. It is reflected in 30 aircraft, ship leasing, and financing entities, and over 50 fintech companies operating from IFSC GIFT City. To my mind, these 6 changes are something which are clearly identified, and there will be unanimity in terms of agreeing to that they have been one of the landmark achievements as far as the government is concerned. But as corporate players, as professionals, we would also like to see what more can be done, what is needed to further spur this growth. First and the foremost, I would like to highlight that the scaling up and globalization of Indian financial sector is a prerequisite. As the backbone of any economy, the financial sector is expected to lead the way, and I would be expecting the policy focus to be on 3 key dimensions: rapid scale up, diversification, and globalization of the Indian banks and the specialized financial institutions. The scale of the Indian banks, it needs to match the global scale, the global peers. And for that to happen, it will be a big thing for us to reach the vision of becoming a $10 trillion economy. This will necessitate the Indian banks to grow, offer some specialized offerings, acquire a global scale, and that would lead to having some meaningful influence as far as the global financial sector is concerned. I do see the encouragement coming in this aspect from the pronouncements that we witnessed from the banking regulator recently. Our banks, they should also globalize, and especially in the regions and the countries where the future economic growth could be lying. For instance, in Africa, as a rating agency, as a group, which has significant presence as far as Africa is concerned, where we have been operating in 3 countries currently and rapidly expanding to more regions. We believe that we can partner, as a rating agency, we can partner the Indian institutions in their journey towards enhancing the understanding of these geographies and provide them a better understanding of the credit culture over there. Towards this, even acquisitions in these markets can be encouraged by the government. As a part of the globalization of the Indian financial system, we may also consider investing in building a global trade settlement and cross border payment mechanism like SWIFT. Further expanding the scope of UPI at an ambitious scale across the world shall also be meaningful and worthwhile. We believe that these steps shall enhance India's influence in the financial sector and better channelize the trade flows, which is a prerequisite today. The next aspect that I'd like to highlight is enhancing the domestic ownership of the Indian financial system. As a growing economy, as an economy which shall be the third largest globally in the next few years, one critical element to achieve the previous goal of scaling up and diversification shall be to have domestic risk capital dominating like never before. Supporting regulations and the steps to bring in the shareholding of the Indian banks onshore could be one great way. Towards this, if needed, and with additional checks and controls, some regulatory measures can also be thought of. Alternatively, innovative capital and subordinated debt instruments could also be encouraged. But let me also qualify my statement by stating that the role for global capital, even in such an environment, cannot be wished away. The third aspect that I'd like to highlight is expanding the horizons of Indian currency. It is a no brainer that the currency of a country plays a critical role in the economic power. And this is clearly visible the way in which the various reserve currencies they have been able to help their economies. As our country expands, as our economy expands, and it acquires the requisite scale further, the role of Indian currency needs to keep pace with that. We have been talking about internationalization of Indian rupee, and this shall warrant, in a way, expanding the role of rupee in the global trade. One way could be invoicing a settlement of the international trade with one leg of the transaction in India to begin with. In the initial stages, this might require incentives for our exporters, and this can be considered for countries where Indian imports are significant, so that there is no buildup of the rupee reserves within that respective country. Another option that can be thought of is to consider entering into currency swap agreements in Indian rupee rather than in foreign currencies. We do believe that there is a long way to go before all these things happen, but we'll have to think through. And over the medium to long term, the work has to be towards greater internationalization of the rupee, as has been very strongly articulated by the government. The next point is to enable, or rather create enabling environment for the Indian corporates to further realize their global ambitions. We can work towards creating greater enablers for the corporate sector through the policy frameworks to allow the corporates to play a greater role beyond the shores of India. I do believe that this is one of the focus areas of the government, and we shall see more pronouncements coming this way. I alluded to one of the big changes in the form of the IFSC having started operations in GIFT City, Gandhinagar. Related to that, as one of the areas to focus upon for the future, is to broaden the presence and the role of GIFT City at Gandhinagar. Even as the GIFT City is expanding its coverage of services, further deepening it will create a stronger bridge for global capital and for the corporates to access and invest in India. This calls for expanding the role and presence of the fund managers, treasury functions, and global trading activities from GIFT City. Further, evolution of GIFT City IFSC as the primary financial center in the country has to be one of the focus areas. And some additional enabling steps in this regard could be expanding the coverage of the currencies which are acceptable at GIFT City, and why not our own Indian rupee as an acceptable currency. If we talk of internationalization of the Indian rupee, this could be one step in terms of having our own IFSC accept Indian rupee also as one of the international currencies. Another aspect is to expand our country's role as a knowledge creator and provider. Our experience suggests that many developing countries, they do need handholding across multiple areas, and it could be financial regulations, it could be the PPP frameworks, it could be education, digital payments, so on and so forth, and for which they are currently looking towards the Western economies. We believe that India has the requisite relevant power and the capabilities available with us to handhold these developing countries. Towards this, our policy focus could be number one, on building global benchmarks in the financial sector. Number two, creating global technology. We can create global technology firms with an orientation and the productization of the services, supporting core research driven IP, enhancing cultural and traditional links with these countries. The next point is the focus on the critical sectors in the country by de-risking our critical sectors like financial sector, infrastructure, and healthcare through a combination of diversifying our vendor base and developing the supply chains. Given the turbulence in the trade relationships that we are witnessing globally, an active plan to secure our market access will reduce the risk to our potential growth. And the eighth pillar that I would like to highlight is enhancing the regulatory capacity, skills, and the risk awareness. As our country grows, there would be need for skilled regulatory and supervisory professionals with a risk-aware mindset. In all of the above, CareEdge, with its global orientations and presence, could be a reliable partner. With this, we all look forward to the address from Dr. Nageshwaran. And prior to that, there will be a brief presentation from our side. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you for those inspiring words and for setting the stage for the conversations that follow. To take the dialogue forward, now we have with us Ms. Revati Kasture, who's the Executive Director, Business Development at CareEdge Ratings, and also the CEO for CareEdge Global Limited. Requesting everyone to please join me in welcoming her. She would be giving a presentation on credit perspectives with respect to India's positioning in global ecosystem in the next decade.
Good evening, everyone. Uh, Respected Dr. Nageshwaran, all guests, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues, a very good evening to all of you. The topic for today's meet is powering India's growth, shaping tomorrow. And who better than Dr. Nageshwaran to speak on that? But before we get there, since CareEdge Global is a global rating agency and has done sovereign rating of India too, I would want to make a presentation just to set the context of where India is today and what are the steps that, as a rating agency, we feel will be moving the credit story upwards or downwards. So that's really the context of the presentation. But before that, a little bit on CareEdge Global IFSC Limited. If you can just put up the presentation. So CareEdge Global IFSC Limited is the first credit rating agency from India to do global scale or sovereign ratings. I need a yeah, yeah, to do global scale or sovereign ratings. We launched our services in October 2024, so exactly 1 year of our operations are over. And we've got a license to operate from IFSCA, which is a unified regulator in GIFT City. We've also got accreditation from the Reserve Bank of India to do as a part of the capital risk weighting mechanism for Indian banks. So, when we launched our operations, we announced ratings on 39 countries across different continents, 24 emerging markets, 15 developed markets. Within first year of our operations, we already qualify among the top 10 rating agencies in the globe in terms of our rating coverage. So thank you. So we've covered 39 countries in the very first year of our operations, and by FY26, we would be completing 45 countries. These are the ratings on different countries that we have given. I'll pause for a minute. The ones in black color are stable outlook, the ones in red are negative outlook, and the ones in green are positive outlook. India has been rated triple B plus. We've also, in this last 1 year, rated $4 billion worth of corporate issuances, either with issuer rating or issue rating. These are the names that we've got associated with. We are very thankful to all the Indian corporates for trusting on their international ratings. While we have built a team which is highly capable and competent, we thought in order to get a perspective, an outside in perspective, we also need a team of experts who have done this before. And that's why our rating committee, apart from having internal members, also has external members. And the external members are on the slide, the top row. These people are ex-raters, have been in the rating business for their career, or they are academicians, they are economists, they understand the rating and the economy domain pretty well. Apart from the rating committee members, we have a set of advisors. These advisors are people who've again been a part of large global rating agencies and have dealt with criterias, methodologies, help us perfect those criterias, those methodologies when we do our ratings. So we have these eminent people assist us in doing ratings, and all the 39 country ratings as well as the $4 billion worth of debt that we rated have gone through this panel. Mehul alluded to differentiations in our methodologies that we have used, and there are quite a few areas of differentiation which are mentioned on the right hand side. Due to paucity of time, I will not go into or delve deeply into this. But what I would like to say is that the methodology offers more transparency. About 80% of our parameters are objective. The subjectivity in the global rating methodologies is somewhere between 25 to 45%, depending on which agency you're looking at. And we have significantly reduced that. So 80% of our parameters are objective parameters. We consistently apply the weightages or the benchmarks across all countries, and we don't have bias or a divided world between a developed and an emerging world. So these are the two large differentiators. Of course, there are parameter wise differentiators that we have for each and every parameter. There are new parameters that we have added. We've changed weightages of certain parameters. And what that has led us to is 50% of our ratings are different from the ratings of global rating agencies. So if we look when we launched our services in October last year, and I'm comparing the ratings of the 39 countries that we have done with ratings of S&P, Moody's, and Fitch, and you will find that in case of S&P, 18 ratings are the same. 8 ratings we were higher, and 12 ratings we were lower in the ratings of the countries. In the last 1 year, in 17 countries out of these 39 countries, we have seen the ratings of these global rating agencies move towards our rating. It just tells us about the superior predictive power of the methodology that we have adopted to come to these ratings. Case in points being, countries like Portugal, where we had a A plus rating and the other rating agency had a A minus. In a matter of 1 year, there was a two-notch upgrade given to Portugal. I mean, India waited for like 19 years to get a one-notch upgrade very recently. So, what I'm saying is that the methodology that we have developed seems to be really having a significant predictive power, and that's what is validated by these convergence that's happening. So this is about what we have done in CareEdge Global. What I now turn to is that what's the global ecosystem that we are today witnessing. It's totally a unfamiliar world that we are getting into. And if I can use the word uncharted territory, is where global economy is really heading towards. This chart typically presents, a decadal journey. There's a global financial crisis which happened in 2008. There was a first U.S.-China trade war which happened in the first Trump presidency. Then there was COVID, and now we are witnessing an era of rising protectionism. So those are the four distinct periods that are there on this graph. And if we look at the teal dotted line, which is going across, then we realize that this is the economic uncertainty index, which is portrayed on this slide. The index of economic policy uncertainty index is something which is at the highest level right now. And that is something which is unprecedented. We never had the situation where the economic policy index was such high, even in times of global financial crisis, even in times of the earlier trade wars, and in times of COVID. So we are definitely, the world is definitely witnessing quite a few disruptions as we speak. The other critical challenge which is emerging on the global front is that global FDI is losing steam. And this is not happening now. It is happening, for the last 10 odd years after the global financial crisis. So from 2008, if you see, then we see that global FDIs are actually showing a downward trend. So after decades of rising interconnectedness till 2008, you were saying hyper globalization, we're actually seeing a globalization in that sense, where you are seeing a deceleration in the global FDI. And global FDI definitely has implications on global trade, global growth, and all of that. This next slide talks about, since we are a rating agency, we have to talk about debt for sure. And this next slide talks about, how there is a rising debt across governmental debt as a percentage of GDP across the board. So if you look at the blue line, that is global government debt as a percentage of GDP, and the black line is the global growth. You're seeing a situation where the global growth is actually going to be lower than the pace at which the governmental debt is going to grow in the next years. And this has happened largely because A, the stimulus packages which were given at the time of COVID, and now also the defense spends, the pension requirements of large global economies, all of them are leading to higher debt that is going to be contracted by most of the economies in the world. So, having seen this, overall global landscape, and probably one more side in terms of global landscape is high trade openness. This is again the countries which you see on the left hand side, Singapore, UAE, Vietnam, Netherlands, all of these benefited from a very high openness in trade. And the countries on the right hand side did not have a very high trade openness. But now, in this entire era of protectionism, we are going to see a different story. So, this seems to be like a double edged sword, the high openness in trade earlier and now making them highly vulnerable. In fact, if you look at the top eight economies on this, then four of them are in APAC. And that's what is even more frightening. So, having said this, there are a lot of emerging challenges on the global front. India definitely, in our view, looks resilient. And why do we say that India looks resilient? Firstly, I went through the methodology. I'll take three pillars of that methodology. One is the economic structure, second is the external position, and third is the fiscal structure. Under the economic structure, we definitely have a healthy economic outlook. Under the robust external position, I'll go through the slides. We have a declining debt to GDP ratio and improving fiscal structure. We've been able to contain the fiscal deposits, and we've actually walked the talk as far as fiscal discipline is concerned. So, if you look at the healthy economic outlook, the share of Indian GDP to the world GDP in PPP terms in 2004 was 4.4%. It's risen to 8.3% in 2024, headed to 10%. What does 10% really give us? It gives us a say in this whole world global economy. It gives us a heft. So this is the rising share is not a reflective of just higher output, but also stronger real domestic purchasing capacity which India has, and this is largely driven by domestic factors. The second point is that in most countries, we are going to see the growth to moderate. However, the countries which are there on the left hand side, and why we have put all the countries over here, mostly APAC countries, because as a rating agency, we do relative rankings. So we have to see one country in relation to the other country. And that's why, if you look relatively speaking, then most of the countries, the growth is expected to moderate. But in case of India, we're seeing that the next 5 years, 2025 to 2030, is going to be better in terms of growth than the earlier 10 years. And that's true for some of the economies of Asia, like Philippines, Indonesia, Bangladesh, too. Now, this is an interesting slide. This talks about how much capital investment is put by a country as a percentage of the GDP, and what is the future real GDP growth rate of the country. Now, if you look at the x axis, it represents investment as a share of GDP, and the y axis captures future real GDP growth rate. The economies which are there in the green zone are the economies with high investment intensity and therefore a high growth rate in future. We found a very high correlation between the current capital investment and the future growth potential of the country. And India is high up top there. If you look at, so this was about the economic pillar. Let's turn to the external position. Now, if you look at the external position, on the x axis is current account balance as a percentage of GDP, and the y axis is the volatility of the current account balance. When you look at different countries, you have countries which are in current account surplus and in current account deficit. India is in current account deficit. But if you look at the volatility of the current account balance, then India has a very low volatility of current account balance. What it means is that even though we are in deficit, we are having a low volatility and therefore stability in the economy. We will not have violent fluctuations. Some of the countries which have surplus but have a high volatility will see a lot of deviation in their numbers on year basis. In the external pillar, of course, the services have played a very big role. From 2021 onwards to 2025, look at the robust growth in the services sector that India has witnessed. It is phenomenal. And also the forex reserves, we have about 8 to 9 months of imports as our forex reserves, and that itself provides a significant amount of cushion for us. All this has definitely led to the improvement of the fiscal structure. India is one of the few economies in the world where you are going to see debt as a percentage of GDP fall. So if you look at debt levels, which are expected to moderate, there are countries on the right hand side and on the left hand side where they are expected to be higher. India is going to see a 5.4% reduction in debt. China is going to see a 24% increase in debt. That itself speaks a lot about our fiscal structure going forward. All this debt is actually majorly held domestically, and that provides a lot of resilience. If you look at the fiscal structure, again, government debt is on a downward path, and CareEdge projects it will be about 70% of GDP. So, monitorables for the Indian credit profile, this is the last section. Interest burden is something which we find as a very sticky parameter. While India is high up there, between 20 to 25% of revenue is our interest burden. It has still high up there. If you look at the right hand side, the long term interest rate yield has lowered for India. It has increased for economies like UK, US, all of them, but still we are high. So this is the monitorable for us. Trade uncertainty, definitely we are in the 50% club. So we have to be worried about that, specifically for industries which are listed over there. The currency movement, another factor that is worrying. In terms of the direction of USD versus other currencies and USD versus rupee. You look at USD versus other currencies, USD has depreciated. In case of India, it has appreciated. India's net FPI investments are also in the negative zone. So FPIs are pulling out money. The other factor which is moderable, the fourth one, is the per capita income. That will come only if you have growth. So finally, what will uplift the rating? What will be a downside scenario? We have a triple B plus on India. Definitely faster than expected pace of fiscal consolidation, higher growth momentum are factors which will lead to an upliftment of the rating. And on the converse, worsening of the current the country's fiscal position, slower than expected growth, higher than expected. We are assuming tariffs at 25%, but if you have a prolonged period of 50% tariffs, then what happens? So those are some of the downward points that we would consider for our rating. But we stand at a triple B plus, stable. I would like to thank my colleagues Annie, Kiran, and Nitesh to put this presentation together. And I'm really eager to listen to Dr. Nageshwaran and his views on India growth story. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Revati, for that engaging presentation. It is now my distinct honor and privilege to welcome the distinguished chief guest of the evening, a name synonym with intellectual depth, policy insight, and visionary economic thoughts. Dr. Nageshwaran, the Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, has been a key architect in shaping the nation's economic direction in recent years. Before being appointed as the Chief Economic Advisor, he has been a writer, author, and a teacher, and he wrote a weekly column in Mint for 15 years and co authored many books. He holds a PhD from the University of Massachusetts and a PhD from IIM Ahmedabad. He's also worked in macroeconomic and financial markets research for global financial institutions in Switzerland and Singapore. So it's a true privilege to have you with us this evening, and we are deeply honored by your presence. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Nageshwaran.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I, as all of you did, I listened to two extremely efficient and competent presentations, one by Mehul, where he laid out the six important changes that have happened in the country and what needs to happen, particularly in terms of enhancing the global stature of India. And then the global CEO and executive director, Ms. Revati Kasture, she did a comprehensive tour de force, I must say, on the strengths of the Indian economy, the risk factors that it faces, and also how the global situation is shaping in terms of higher debt, higher trade uncertainties, lower FDI flows, and the elevated levels of uncertainty. So, after having listened to these two efficient and competent presentations, I'm at a loss to figure out what exactly am I going to add in terms of value. So, I must compliment them for putting a very comprehensive overview of the situation both globally and domestically. I must thank CareEdge for because they're the first rating institution in the world. I'm very glad to see their progress. They're already in the first year of operation. They are in the global top 10, and they are the first credit rating agency to assign India a triple B plus credit rating. And as Ms. Renuka showed in one of her slides, where CareEdge leads, others follow. And even in the case of India, it turned out to be true. After they rated India triple B plus, this year we had S&P upgrading India to a triple B rating, DBRS doing the same thing, and the Japanese credit rating agency R&I Investments, which is a 50-year-old institution, also upgrading India to a triple B plus. So this was the first year uh, uh, where we had three upgrades, of course, which was all preceded by the rating stamp of approval to growth and the fiscal track of India given by CareEdge. So I appreciate the stamp of approval for the macroeconomic trajectory that we got from CareEdge. Thank you very much. Now, as far as the theme of the evening is concerned, powering India's growth and shaping tomorrow, as I said, since we heard two very good presentations, one a set of remarks and another with the PowerPoint deck, I'm going to slightly change the theme around to say, what are the forces that will shape India's growth of tomorrow? So, with that, I'm going to share with you a few slides. Okay, let me just, yeah, in general, people can foresee the future when it coincides with their own wishes, and the most grossly obvious facts can be ignored when they are unwelcome. In other words, human beings have a tendency to conflate what is likely to happen versus what they would like to see happen. They usually treat as predictions what they would like to see happen. But a prediction has to be an objective analysis of the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. And if you look at the slide, although maybe it is clear. On the bottom right, you see three predictions of this QE infinity trap. This is not a slide made by me. It is a slide made by a fund manager whom I didn't know before. But as most of you would have also had a lot of time on your hands in the COVID year, as you can see, this is now February 2020 slide. But I discovered this slide only in November 2020. And I felt that this captured what was going on in the world or what had gone on in the world since the global financial crisis. And the most important thing is He correctly predicted populism, trade wars. The second box is financial repression, and the third box is military conflicts. Now, the important thing about this slide is that we all tend to focus on the symptoms rather than the underlying problem. So, whether it is tariffs, whether it is trade uncertainties, declining FDI flows, higher debt, those are the manifestations of what started at least from 2008, if not earlier. Because what governments did post COVID crisis was to build on their template that they have devised during the COVID time, during the global financial crisis, and simply enhanced it with a higher fiscal stimulus as well. And apart from the monetary stimulus in 2020, because that was already unleashed in 2008. The monetary stimulus in terms of zero interest rates and quantitative easing, imagine that was a solution given to the world which was already experiencing a crisis based on high debt. So, what does lower interest rates do? It encourages further borrowing. So, it was a medicine given to a problem which to a disease, and it ended up being a catalyst for further aggravating the disease. And that is why you saw in her slides much higher levels of debt. So, the situation that the world finds itself today, to a very large extent, can be traced to the kind of response. Of course, if you want to trace it back, you can trace it even further, all the way to the onset of globalization in the 1980s, at the end of the decade of double-digit inflation rates in the 70s, and so on, uh, or the end of the Cold War, or the end of the tech bubble in 2000, etc. But the point is, the response of policymakers to the global financial crisis have brought us nearly 20 years later to the point where we are faced with the prospect of populism is there, trade wars, financial repression, and military conflicts. What is financial repression? It is to deny savers choices. It is to deny savers real rates of return. And that is possible if there is higher inflation tolerance in the developed world, and investors and savers will experience negative real rates of return, which is what they experienced during the second decade as well. Negative real rates of return on their savings, which did not boost capital formation, but which boosted speculation. And the epitome of that is what we are finding today with respect to the artificial intelligence companies as well, and the kind of dominance they have in the stock indices in the United States, etc., and so on. So they have all the classic telltale signs of a bubble, which I'm sure you are reading about as well. So this is where we are in the global context. And now I take you back even further. This is available on the internet, and if you don't have anything better to do, I would urge you to download it and read it. The Fate of Empires and the Search for Survival. And what you are seeing in this slide is that most empires last about 250 years. You can do your own math as to what comes out of this slide. I'm not going to lay it out to you because there are quite a few friends from the media here. And this is a book I read also during the COVID year, although this book was published in 1997. In a book published in 1997, when the authors predict three things that were supposed to happen in the first decade or two of the new millennium, and these two authors predicted three things to happen in the first decade or two of the new millennium. They said there will be a financial crisis, there will be a pandemic, and there will be a terrorist incident involving a plane. If these two authors, looking at 600 years of data, could predict something like that in 1997, roughly saying that these three events will happen somewhere in the first two decades of the new millennium, then obviously you have to take them seriously. There must be something in their methodology that they must have gotten right. So, what was there? important prediction. And they call it the fourth turning, which, again, just to give you a little bit of a teaser, they divide a period of 80 to 100 years as consisting of four phases, and each phase is called the turning. And the fourth turning is the fourth innings, if you want to call it, or the fourth phase of what they call a saeculum. SAACULUM. Saeculum is 80 to 100 years. Now, the important thing to remember here is that if you date 1945 as an important turning point in the world, end of World War II, almost the entire world is at the end of a saeculum right now. That is why you are seeing issues not just occupying one part of the world, but almost the entire world. And it is not just true of the United States or Western Europe or the Soviet Union, which is now Russia. China, for example, the Communist Party came into office in 1949. India got its independence in 1947. So, in other words, this is the decade or the decades of churn and inflection for almost the entire world. And that is why you are witnessing so much, as she pointed out in her slide, the uncertainty index is literally off the charts. And that is where we are. In other words, these are the forces that are going to shape our tomorrow, that there is going to be a decade or even longer of major churn in the world, socially, politically, and economically. And that is what this book talks about. A fourth turning lends people of all ages a once in a lifetime opportunity to heal or destroy the very heart of the republic. And incidentally, not only the 250-year cycle that I showed you earlier, this is another book by George Friedman, The Storm Before the Calm, America's Discord, The Crisis of the 2020s and the Triumph Beyond. This slide is taken from that book also. And in his telling, the third cycle ends in 2025. He divides the cycles into 80-year period and the socio-economic cycle into 50-year period. And that as well concludes somewhere in this decade. So what I'm trying to show you is that whether you read The Fourth Turning by Neil Strauss and William Hove, or you read the speech by Sir John Glubb on the fate of empires, where he talks about 250-year cycles, or you read George Friedman, who talks about 80 to 50-year cycles, all of them converge in this decade, which is why this decade is so important. That is why it will reshape, realign, reimagine, reconfigure relationships and economic trajectories. And amidst this, if we are asked to predict where and how growth will be, not for the world, for India, or for that matter, any country, it is a humongously difficult job and also a hazardous job, especially when we don't have a good track record of predicting the future. We are very good at explaining the past. And if you look at this book by Professor Martin Rees, The Final Hour, he narrates an incident or a story. In 1937, the US National Academy of Sciences organized a study, and basically it produced a report, and it is a very sobering and a humbling reading for forecasters today. That report came up with wise assessments about agriculture, synthetic gasoline, synthetic rubber. But what is more remarkable are the things that the report missed. There was no mention of nuclear energy, no antibiotics. It was just 8 years after Alexander Fleming had discovered penicillin. No jet aircraft, no rocketry, nor any use of space, no computers, and certainly no transistors. That committee, which is a eminent body of scientists, overlooked the technologies 13 years before the second half of the century was about to begin, and they completely overlooked and did not anticipate the technologies that were going to dominate the second half of the century. Still less, therefore, if they cannot, as scientists, if they could not predict the technological transformation that were going to happen in the second half of the 20th century, then there is very little chance that they could predict the social and political transformation that happened during that time. So, in other words, when we are trying to predict where the future will hold, we should remember our track record. It is less than stellar. to put it mildly. And then Professor Michael Muthukrishna, he wrote this book called A Theory of Everyone, who we are, how we got here, and where we are going. And in this, he describes actual experiment that was conducted because we have laid out in the first 10-15 minutes the state of the play globally. However, what is it that we can do in our country to shape our tomorrow? And this is a very critical element. If you read this slide, basically what it shows is that a situation, this was asked of people in different nationalities. The question was, your friend is in the car driving at 35 miles in a 20-mile zone, and you are the only one, and there are no witnesses, and they hit a pedestrian. Will you are the witness, what would you do? Will you save your friend from any serious consequences, or would you lie? Because they say that your friend's lawyer says if you testify under oath that he was driving within the specified speed limit, your friend will be exonerated, will be acquitted. So when people around the world were asked this question, the majority of Koreans, Russians, Chinese, and if I guess Indians also said that they would lie for their friend. But over 90% of Swiss, Canadians, Americans, Swedes, Brits, and the Dutch said that the friend has no or only some right to expect support and that they would not help their friend. Now, there's nothing negative about the first set of reactions, by the way. Because even in the West, if you ask anybody, they would tell you family comes first, friends come next, then the other outsiders. It is just an extension of this mindset that translates into this kind of a response. This is exactly the message of Joseph Heinrich's book, The Weirdest People in the World, where the word weird stood for white, educated, rich, industrialized, democratic. So, in other words, if we are going to put a lot of emphasis, talk close circle, that kind of systems militate against the scale that is required. Scale requires trust between strangers. Arm's length relationships have to believe in the sanctity of contracts between the government and the public, and between members of the public themselves, between businesses and consumers. If this attitude, which is what we have inherited over centuries, where we place the importance of family, friends, kinship, communities, network, and then the larger network or society, naturally this inhibits scale. Now, if you imagine why societies in Asia and Africa, etc., or for that matter, Persian Gulf, start with so much of regulations, compliances, inspections, and so on, it is because we are a society marked by low trust without and high trust within. Within communities, within groups, within family and friends, we have very high trust. Even word of mouth will be enough for huge transaction sizes. But just outside that closed network, there is no sanctity of contract by and large. There are multiple certifications, attestations, notarizations, references we need, which means we do have a certain work in progress. We are a work in progress, and we need certain evolution to be able to achieve the socio-economic transformation on scale. Which is why some of these countries, if you look at the countries that get stuck in the middle income trap, it is because they have been eventually unable to transcend the scale deficiencies and drawbacks. So if we have to fulfill our destiny or the dream of becoming Viksit Bharat, we need to overcome this trust barrier without or in the larger society, wherein we are able to achieve that within close groups but not in larger groups. And that is where deregulation and de-licensing, all these things matter a great deal because that depends on trust. And when the government trusts the industry, there is a need for reciprocation on both sides. Otherwise, it will become a cat and mouse game, which is what it leads to. If the government trusts and deregulates and the society doesn't respond, then the government comes back with a higher level of regulation and tightness and so on and so forth. And then it just builds on itself. So the vicious circle of regulation, compliance, and then evasion leading to even more regulation has to be broken with the virtuous circle of trust. And that is an important power and force that will shape our tomorrow. And the other dimensions which we need to focus on, if we have to shape our tomorrow the way we want it, we should also remember the context in which is why I presented the earlier slides about the context. East Asia transitioned to the first world in the 20th century. The rest of Asia, it is a work in progress. The geopolitical context was different then. The United States helped several countries rise. Not sure if it is happening today. Transition constraint. Countries did not have to manage fuels and also find a way to reduce their fossil fuel usage. They didn't have to do both at the same time. They could burn enough fossil fuels without worrying about the consequences. Whereas today, we have to prioritize somehow energy affordability and energy security and energy transition, which has never been done in the past. You just have to read Václav Smil to show that energy transition has never happened in the world. Because when we discovered new sources of fuel, we did not abandon the old sources of fuel. When we went from rubbing stones to create fire, to wood, to coal, to oil, then to nuclear, we did not abandon any of the old fuels sources. We continue to use them. If you count the wood that we use in our cardboard boxes and all the online goods we buy, thinking that we are saving on, if we are digitizing and therefore we are becoming more efficient, then the amount of wood we consume in the online packages that you receive, we are consuming more wood than before. When we think we have migrated to other more superior products, environmentally friendlier products. That is the paradox of our progress. So, those countries in the 1950s to 1990s did not have to worry about these dimensions. Number third, demographics were different. In other words, people were younger, and now the demographics is changing everywhere, including in India, where the population growth rate is slowing, and some parts of the country already have a demographic growth rate, population growth rate, which is on par with Western European societies. And we need industrial policy focused on productivity and performance. In other words, most of the time, the industry still looks for protection from competition because we think some other country has a large capacity, production facilities, and they use both tariff and non-tariff measures. We need to use them as well. Of course, when industrial policy is applied by other countries, we cannot remain passive, but it's important to know that protection has to come with quid pro quo obligations on the part of the industry. In other words, protection should be not in perpetuity, not permanent, but in return for productivity and export performance. And it has to be temporary. And we have to focus on investment in primary education. Reading references, let me add one more to it. James Tooley wrote a book called The Beautiful Tree. James Tooley came to India as a World Bank consultant, and he was about to go and report about primary education. Somehow he felt he wouldn't be doing justice if he went to the schools in the city. He was in Hyderabad, and he decided over the weekend to take a cycle rickshaw, go into the old city, into Secunderabad, and so on, and wrote about the boom in private education and private schools and institutions. And he thought that must be the situation in other emerging economies as well. And lo and behold, that's what he found. And one of the things he writes about that is if today China has established a lead in several technology areas, The investment in primary and secondary education in terms of numeracy and reading skills was very established at a very early age. And post COVID, that is an important area to focus on because that is where the foundation for being able to scale technological frontier lies. We have to make sure that when our children graduate after 12 years of schooling, they have the appropriate levels of reading comprehension and numerical skills as well. And in the age of artificial intelligence, which is going to be most likely displacing low IT enabled services, low value added IT enabled services, vocational education requires as much importance because today's developed countries, Switzerland, Japan, Germany, Korea, and China, did not get to where they are by ignoring vocational education. Whereas in this country, we kind of treat it as an inferior cousin to going to university. Whereas in Switzerland, for example, university was reserved for those who were considered serious academic types, and everybody else, including senior bank executives, etc., after schooling went for vocational schools. So, in fact, we need to make vocational school the pride of our education system. It is what the country needs to become a manufacturing power, and it is what the country needs to be able to handle the consequences of artificial intelligence and its spread across the society and the economy. So, these are the things that we need to be focused on in order to be able to power and shape our future. However, I don't want to leave you because you have a dinner ahead of you. I don't want to leave you with an appetite that looks a bit dull after all this laying out of challenges and talking about the political, global political churn that is going to happen. What Morgan Housel says is that in spite of this era of uncertainty that the world faced in the 1930s, so many important developments that paved the foundation for the future prosperity that commenced after the end of the World War, all of those good things happened in the decade of the 30s when all that you remember about the 30s is bank failures, Great Depression, 50% drop in industrial production, unemployment rate of 25% in the US, etc., and the beginning and the spread of the Second World War. But all these important things and good things happened as well. So, if this is going to be a decade or two of churn, socially, politically, it will also be a decade of technological churn, and a lot of Amrit nectar will come out of that as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presence here. I hope between the three of us, we have given you enough food for thought and left you with still some more space for the actual food that is awaiting you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nageshwaran, for your insightful and inspiring address. I would now like to request our MD and CEO, Mr. Mehul Pandya, to kindly felicitate Dr. Nageshwaran. Please come this way. We now move into an engaging panel discussion featuring India's leading voices from infrastructure, energy, and investments. The panel will share diverse perspectives, deep expertise, and insights on the opportunities, challenges, innovations driving India's next phase of economic growth. To moderate today's discussion, we have with us Mr. Sachin Gupta, Chief Rating Officer and our Executive Director at CareEdge Ratings. Mr. Gupta brings over 22 years of leadership across the credit rating industry and takes over as CEO of CareEdge on 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming him to the dais. I would also like to invite our esteemed panelists to take their seats as I introduce them one by one, and I request you all to please give them a warm round of applause. Our first panelist is Mr. P.S. Gangadhar, Joint Secretary, Economic Diplomacy Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. He's responsible for shaping India's foreign policy related to economic diplomacy and global trade and technology collaborations. He's a career diplomat from the 2005 batch of Indian Foreign Services and has held various diplomatic and trade related roles both in India and abroad. Next, we have Mr. Sanjay Kulchetra, Managing Director, HUDCO. He serves as a Chairman and Managing Director of HUDCO since October of 2023. He's an electrical engineer with over 3 decades of experience in infrastructure financing and worked with state corporations and private sector institutes. Before joining HUDCO, he's worked with RSC for past 17 years and is focused on strengthening HUDCO's role in India's infra development aligned with government vision of Viksit Bharat. I also would now like to invite Mr. Vijay Shekhar, CEO Cube Highways Invade, to join us on the dais. He's a founding team member and CEO of Cube Highways, one of the India's largest infrastructure asset managers. With 15 years of experience in infra investment, he brings deep sector expertise. And next we have with us Mr. S.K. Gupta, Executive Director, AMP and Energy Transition, to take his seat. He has 4 decades of experience in manufacturing, EPC, and renewables energy sector across India and abroad. Sachin, over to you.
Thanks. I think it was a fantastic talk given by Mr. Nageshwar, and I think very balanced. Gave us a good perspective, the challenges that we face, but then still a lot of hope as to what things are going right and what we can do to improve it going forward. So I will take it on from the similar context. Very clearly, as some of the earlier presentations also mentioned, at a broad level, the domestic environment is quite positive, but the international, the global, the geopolitical is where most of the risks lie. And in that context, I'm very happy to have the panel that we have. Mr. Gangadhar, he brings to us the expertise on the trade, which is really no one really used to bother about tariffs, including the analyst, but now that has certainly become a very, very hot word. And also we have, good representation from the financial services and in the infrastructure. Again, very, very focused areas for the economic growth of the country. So broadly, just to set the context, while it has been given in some detail by the earlier presentations, but if I see, and someone who's been in the an analyst for last 25 years, very clearly, if I look back and see where we are, the macroeconomic situation of India, to my mind, is one of the best. We have low inflation. We have interest rates which are likely to come down. We have a financial system which is very robust. Our NPA levels are less than one, and also the fiscal deficit of the government is on a declining path, which again should help us to keep the interest rates low. Also, the economic growth, the GDP growth in the last quarter, as all of you would know, is at a very high 7.8%, and even the outlook is to be at about 6.5 or so percent. So it seems very good. But when we look at the international scenario, it is almost like the opposite. There is geopolitical tensions like we have seen never before, at least in the last 2 to 3 decades. We also see critical economies like US and China, they're facing challenge in their own economic growth. And then in order to get out of their slowdown, they're also trying to take actions which again are impacting countries like India, which are wanting to grow at a further high pace. And also in terms of overall economic growth, while we are doing well, the global growth, just to put it in context, is at 3% and at a declining path. So in that context, I think what we really have to see that what the government has done and what more needs to be done and what more needs to be done by the private sector. So the government, if we see in the last two quarters, and I would say RBI included, has taken many actions which clearly has given confidence. Both the income tax rate cuts, the GST cut which has just happened, also the RBI's action in terms of improving the liquidity, reducing the interest rates, and also many the recent RBI policy talked about a lot of prudential norms, which basically allows banks and other financial institutions to do more of lending without putting a lot of constraints. So overall, I think we are seized of the matter. The question, honestly, that we have, and we will try and debate today, and to some extent, Mr. Nageshwaran also mentioned about that, is are we capable to increase our growth from outside, beyond the 6.5% that we've been seeing, or we will get into what typically we hear as a middle income trap. And if we were comparing from last 2 years, 2 years back, we were very, very positive that yes, we are, all things are right and the growth should happen. But now we are seeing a lot of challenges, especially from a growth perspective, for the growth. So in that context, I will, ask the first question, Mr. Gangadhar, and especially the big elephant in the room everyone is worried about is the US tariffs. And, that is what I would kind of get straight to the point. At 50% tariffs, some of the industries are extremely, vulnerable. We've already seen as a rating agency, we rate many of them. There is a significant stress on that. While the overall US exports is only maybe 2% of the GDP, but the impact on job losses, small businesses shutting down is very, very serious. So the question is, how do you see it getting resolved? And if you could share with us, I understand it's an ongoing negotiation, so there will be limitation to how much you can share. But, if you could give us some confidence that, what could be the possible contours of such a deal, and how do you think it will pan out in the near future?
Thank you. Thank you, Sachin. First of all, I would like to thank CareEdge for inviting me for this panel. It's a great pleasure to be part of your flagship event. And particularly, I would like to mention that the way in which CareEdge is going about expanding its global footprint, which is commendable. And we in the Ministry of External Affairs would like to support, your growth in any way that we can. On the question of tariffs or the elephant in the room, as you said, and its impact and what we can do about it. Yes, of course, there will be an impact. There can be no denying of that, given that US is a major trading partner of India. And this is true for almost every country which has been faced with these tariffs. And yesterday, the World Trade Organization just revised its global trade forecast for 2026 to 0.5%. Now, the extent of impact on India would actually depend on a number of factors, including what we do to minimize it. First, as you all are aware, we are still engaged in, bilateral discussions with the United States, and our Commerce Minister and more recently our Foreign Minister, mentioned what we need is for both sides to sort of flesh out a win-win and mutually beneficial agreement, and I hope we can get there soon. Second, I would say that COVID sort of exposed the problems of over concentrated supply chains, and then that brought in efforts to diversify the supply chains. Here we are, in a situation where again the risks of over dependence on certain markets has actually sort of come to the fore. So therefore, this again calls for diversification, and it's not easy, but we have to work on it. And the third thing that I wanted to mention is that those sectors, you mentioned some of them, that will be impacted. Certainly, they need support. Our government has been working on it. I mean, you mentioned about the GST reforms, which came into effect just a couple of weeks ago. I mean, that is basically aimed at spurring domestic consumption. As you know, domestic demand is still the major driver of growth, in India, and our exposure outside, is still limited. If you compare it with other major economies. So these are, in my view, some of the positive points, that we could, sort of reflect on. And the more positive was the presentation that was made by CareEdge, in terms of showing how sound we are on the macroeconomic side. So there are, I think, despite, what she mentioned about the economic policy uncertainty index being very high, I think India take home the comfort that that our fundamentals are strong, and also both on the trade side and also on the foreign policy side, we are working through or trying to navigate these challenges? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gangadhar. Uh, I mentioned that in the one of the strongest points about the macroeconomy is our strong BFSI, the banking and the financial institution strength, and we have seen across board NPAs have kind of come down. Obviously, IBC, NCLT, some of these things have played a big role. My question to Mr. Kulshresh from HUDCO, in terms of growth, since the theme today is growth, we've seen from an infrastructure is one of the biggest pillars of our growth, and as we've seen in the last decade and a half, uh, and roads and renewables has been the big driver of that, and we have roads and renewables, two gentlemen here to talk about it. So I will ask you, from your perspective, and since you are also focusing on growth of Hudko's book beyond your traditional components. Uh, where do you see incremental growth coming from in infra for lending?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I will take forward the points that earlier speakers has taken, starting from the support from the stakeholder like RBI, the government of India, the state governments, and the financial institutions. There is an impact of tariff, but apart from that, since we are a demand market and a lot of infrastructure needs to be created in our country, and now there is a very strong commitment from government of India, very strong commitment regarding the programs, the policies, the capital expenditures. So on budget to budget, we had seen that a lot of support is coming, lot of guidance is coming to the markets, and all these financial institutions, including HUDCO, are the beneficiaries of that. HUDCO has started its journey from housing, and now we are transforming our business model, and now we are entirely into the infrastructure apart from the housing. If you see the initiative which were taken by the government of India, which are followed by the state government on the theme of Viksit Bharat, now every state is coming out with the Viksit state like Viksit Rajasthan, Viksit Maharashtra, Viksit Tamil Nadu. So against all tides, everybody is thinking that every state will be Viksit and then only the India will Viksit, which is the right mantra also. And our development, our infrastructure growth will be driven by the aspirations of 140 crores peoples of the India. Because now the peoples are aspiring that they should have good roads, they should have good water, tapped water should be there, or the sewage system should be there, the waste disposal should be there. So all these things will be there, and these are the actually growth drivers of the country. And HUDCO, since is financing all the infrastructure, so I think apart from the road and the renewable, our urban landscape needs lot of investments. And as per World Bank report, if we see around 70 lakh crores of the investment is required by during the period of 21 to 36, and that's what we are we are we are taking a take on that, that how these investments will come. It may come from the government of India, maybe government or state governments or multilateral banks, or then HUDCO and other NBFCs which will be financing these infrastructure. So I will not focus on one sector because every state has different kind of aspirations and the require. So we are opening up and we are funding each and every state of the infrastructure.
Great. Thank you, sir. I think urban landscape that you mentioned certainly offers a lot of opportunity, and we've not seen much of good projects. Yeah, so for us, that will be great. Let me come to Vinay from Cube Highways. Again, similar question. Uh, road has been actually the poster boy of PPP in the country. It's a very mature sector. We've seen toll roads and now HAM obviously doing very well, and there are learnings for us to take, the similar concession agreements, the similar risk sharing between the government and the private sector. How do you feel, what could be other areas where the similar thing could be implemented and, with fast growth?
Sure. Thanks, Sachin. Thanks to CareEdge as well. Uh, so I agree that roads has been one of the standout successes of our infrastructure story. Uh, I don't think it's going to slow down as well. I think uh, today all of the listed InvITs put together have about 2 to 3 lakh crores of AUM, and the yearly MORTH budget is about 3 lakh crore, right? So we're creating as much assets as that are existing today. So we're still in the J curve there. But I certainly think, in my opinion, and I think there's global consensus around what are the areas of infrastructure that most people, most investors are looking to invest, most governments are looking to incubate. One is energy transition and associated investments. We continue the path renewable. We want to double our capacity to 500 gigawatts. That continues. You have the other sort of transitions, green hydrogen and other aspects. You have the green mobility segment, whether it's electrification, vehicles, the value chain, electrification in terms of charging ports, etc. Uh, so that entire value chain is a huge opportunity, and I think that is something that uh, India is again working on. The second theme is, of course, the digital infrastructure. We've done well. We've invested in fiber. We've invested in towers. There's data center investments that have started picking up. And then when you relate it sort of this again relates to the energy transition, because once you start data centers in certain capacities, you need to solve for the energy as well. And when you do energy, you need transmission. So I think all of these are linked sectors. And then the third key sector, and this is specifically as Sanjay ji said, pointed out, is urban infrastructure. India certainly requires a huge amount of investments in urban infra. We've taken a few starts, and I think some of these sectors could learn from the roads and the renewable successes. I think, in my opinion, one of the key sort of underpinning reasons for the success is the capacity building on the government side, with an NHAI or a SECI, which help create policy stability, create favorable environment for people to then start investing in sort of large quantities. And I think around that
Yeah,
lines.
yeah. I think, when I, having looked at infrastructure almost all my life, I feel that the sectors where the rules are made, one set of rules are made by the central government, they generally kind of work. But then when it comes to the states, and that is where when we talk to the government also, their belief is also not the states need to take that next step to have that, those risk sharing mechanisms and all that. So we hope that that is something that will work. I'll come to Mr. S.K. Gupta from AMP Energy. Sir, one of the key things in the renewable energy that again, like roads, has been one of the key growth drivers for us. A lot of capacities across solar, wind have been created. One of the key themes that we are seeing over the last 1 year or so is backward integration into supply chain of, say, solar equipment, which is again to make us more atmanirbhar and compete with China. And a lot of capacities on solar modules and cells, and even further going back to polysilicon, etc., are being either constructed or already constructed. You as a developer, do you think, and you have a choice of buying, say, from China or from India, what stage do you think that we will be able to produce high quality equipment within India at the same price as what China, because China very clearly is the lowest cost. So do you see that possibility in the next maybe a couple of years for us?
Thanks, Sachin. It's a very interesting question. Uh, Look, there is something called an inflex point beyond which you suddenly see in manufacturing, you see speed grows very fast, and that's when the economies of scale starts falling in. Now, if we look at the Indian industry today in renewable, especially solar, the module manufacturing capacities have reached a level of almost 100 gigawatt plus, and almost 50, 60 gigawatt plus is actively operating right now. Now, having reached that scale, the next point of inflex comes when the cell manufacturing becomes economically more viable now. With the average capacity that you need for a cell manufacturing plant is approximately around 5 gigawatt, at which you can say economies of scale are coming to you. So those scales have come, and I think we are seeing already 20-25 gigawatt of cell manufacturing capacities having been established, and the productions being ramped up. We think in the next 3 to 5 years time, cell manufacturing will be the first area where there'll be much larger focus, and we may be touching something like 50 gigawatt plus in the next 3 to 5 years on the cell manufacturing side also, because of the economies of scale and the saturation of technology and the skill set within the country right now. I think the bigger worries right now in terms of further backward integration in the value chain and moving towards wafer, ingot, and into silicon. If today we look at between PLI 1 and PLI 2, a total of approximately 21 gigawatt of capacities have been tied up between Indosol, Reliance, and First Solar into manufacturing of silicon, and then backward integration into backward integration from silicon into cell to wafer and ingot and wafer. This is a small capacity right now. I think once the cell capacity start moving to a level of 40-50 gigawatt in the country, there'll be a further impetus, and the economy of scale will start falling into wafer and ingot manufacturing, also ingot and wafer manufacturing also. In the next 5 years or so, I think these capacities may start touching something like operational capacities may start touching something like 30-40 gigawatt plus or so. The worry will still continue to be on the silicon side. Silicon investments are very high. Economies of scale, the plant sizes are very large. China has a very large capacity right now on the silicon manufacturing side. So I think our dependence on import of silicon may be there for next 5-7 years or so to a fairly large extent. But over a period of time, I think in the next horizon of 5 to 10 years time, we should be substantially uh, independent on the complete value chain, and when those capacities come, we should be in the position to compete with any country in the world in that case.
Okay.
So that's but
Yeah.
one major point I want to highlight here. Whenever I'm in a group like this and we talk about Atmanirbhar on the solar manufacturing side specifically, I think what I've been realizing is that we have a very narrow focus. We're only talking about manufacturing of key components into a solar manufacturing cycle. Where is the R&D? Where is the technology development in this area? We are completely and fully dependent on international technology for this as of now. And I do not find any visible effort being made by any authority, government, private sector, or joint sector into core development of technology. The second critical thing is that we manufacture modules. We are now doing cells. We'll tomorrow do wafer and ingot also. All these equipments are being imported. Every single piece of equipment except some very basic equipment on the module manufacturing which might have been Indianized, everything is being imported right now. So where is Atmanirbhar Bharat in that case? You don't have technology, you don't have equipment, you are only simply doing production. That's not what you Atmanirbhar Bharat means in that case. Look at space, look at defense. We have proved to the world in a very short span of time that we are competent of doing the complete value chain, including the equipment part. And I think with some of the senior people from the government also sitting here right now, my message to and earnest request to the government and to the whole industry is that we have to start working on this in this direction right now. We have some of the finest development labs in the world today that we have proved. IITs are available there. The international labs, I think, joint collaboration between international development labs and Indian institutions like IITs, creating private labs in India with joint ownership of government and private. So it's not I cannot say that it's purely going to be a government effort because the whole industry is private today. So the private sector has to move into the next level, start moving into the development of technology and also equipment manufacturing. If you develop
Right.
technology and then integrate it with equipment, you are in a position to take on the next level of technology at minimal cost. Why some of the initial examples of failures happened in the industry when initially some people started doing cell manufacturing or module manufacturing in the country. They simply brought equipment, they set up a line. The line had no flexibility because the people never had any knowledge of technology. Any next level change in technology, the lines were outdated. The whole project
Right.
went in closer.
Yeah. So I think got your point. I think the big point is that only manufacturing without adequate innovation and R&D will not really be make us fully Atmanirbhar in that sense. And I think that's a very fair point. And increasingly, we will have to make efforts in that. And yeah, the corporates and the government will have to do. Let me come to you, Mr. Gangadhar. One of the things apart from the US tariffs is the new focus or the renewed focus on closing these FTAs, right? We've done already one with UK, and then we're talking about maybe EU is also around the corner, and and obviously even with US we will have some kind of an FTA. Now, and you worked in WTO, in your past experiences. So do you think that we now will have only like bilateral trade deals with the countries or with unions like European Union, and maybe the WTO is kind of dead? And also, in terms of what you see are the benefits that to the Indian corporates we can expect with, say, some of these trade deals that we are negotiating through the FTA route.
Yeah. Um, s- First of all, what you see the India's current approach to the FTAs, it is something which is not new. It's been there for some time. Yes, the multilateral organization, the WTO, which you mentioned, which was basically designed to progress trade liberalization and protect what we call as the rules-based order, has faced challenges. Though the MFN-based, world trade is still dominates, but increasingly, what we see, not just in India but across the world, countries have actually chosen to go the FTA way. This includes actually those countries which are strong votaries of the multilateral trading system, including India. And it is not that both the multilateral trading system, of which WTO is at its core, and then the FTAs are at loggerheads. In fact, if you look at the way in which the WTO is structured, it allows the FTAs to coexist together with the broader multilateral trading framework. So, therefore, choosing one doesn't actually undermine the other. And since the FTA negotiations, due to probably limited number of participants and easier convergence of interests, can produce quicker outcomes. And also the outcomes could be balanced, probably because of that countries tend to prefer that. But also we have cases where some negotiations have gone on for a longer time.
Mm.
That's why actually we see countries across the world exercising this option of going the FTA route, which I feel is good for trade, good for the world economy, and also good for the countries themselves. And also, it is true that recently the old model of what we call as the efficiency-based trading arrangements, has been challenged, and national security considerations in trading arrangements have come to play much more strongly than what they did before. Again, the WTO rules actually allow for those circumstances, but but it's also a matter of interpretation and also adjudication whether any trade measure meets that criteria. This is where the WTO's dispute settlement system actually becomes important. But unfortunately, with the appellate body in the WTO being non existent for many years for now, WTO is unable to perform this important function of adjudicating trade disputes. And this is where the real problem actually lies as far as the WTO is concerned. The question really is, how do we get the WTO dispute settlement system back? And in my view, that is the foremost issue when it comes to reforming of the WTO is concerned. Thank you.
Got it. And just a quick one, how soon do you think EU uh, FTA could be kind of finalized? Maybe just broad idea if you can give us.
Yes. So, if you are, probably you are aware, and many others would be, that when the European commissioners, the entire College of European Commissioners, when they were in India, earlier this year, they had sort of set a time frame, to sort of conclude the deal by end of the year. So that is where the target as of now lies.
End
And
of
then,
calendar
yes,
25.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So therefore, that is the target which has actually been set by both the leaders.
Got it.
So, and then intense negotiations are ongoing. So let's look
Okay.
forward to see
Yeah.
how it pans out.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Kulstesh, infra was actually one of the worst performing sectors till some time back. Most of the banks, other financial institutions were really laden with bad debts, and all of us are aware of that. And now it's kind of, so it's actually become from a bad boy to a good boy, if I were to use a very simple phrase. Do you see now, where we stand, and now you are at the, you mentioned in your earlier answer that HUDCO is also planning to grow its book in a major way across the infrastructure sector. What are the risks that you are seeing, which we should be aware of, which can hold us back?
I think to start with, for a large infrastructure project, the policy framework, the land regulations of the states, the availability of the long-term funding, contractual disputes. These are the major issues that we all know that we have to address these kind of issues. But at the same time, our focus should be on the capacity building. Because if you see the examples of the road and the renewable energy, how we had monetized our land banks, which were never utilized, and we are keep on monetizing our land banks. I think we should take the lessons from them, and I think at the ground level, at the ULB's level, city level, or state level, it is the capacity which needs to be built to identify the good project, to make the bankable projects, to make the financial structuring of the project, to make the financial closure of the projects. All these things needs to be done, but at the epicenter of that thing, I think it's the capacity building, because once we have to work with the capacity of our peoples only, then only good projects can come, then only the financial success can come, and we can address all kind of things, including the policies, because state understand all these things. But at the same time, there should be a pressing need to resolve these kind of policies issues, and that will only come when the projects will come and they will become bankable and address the GST, GDP,
And
or
yeah,
all these
and I
kind of
understand
things.
HUDCO is playing a role in building these projects, right, at the state and the urban local body level. Great, thank you. Uh, when I, since you are a CEO of an InvITs actually, and this is a very recent phenomenon, maybe 10, 12 years old, and they have actually been one of the key growth drivers. I don't think too many people know, but one of the biggest things to happen in our infrastructure sector was InvIT, because they've allowed the developers to sell their projects or make it as a separate vehicle and deleverage their main balance sheets. And leverage was a challenge earlier in the past. So it's been a good story. Do you see? Do we need to do something more to kind of let InvITs kind of grow even further from where they are?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, I think InvITs today stand, InvITs and REITs together stand about 8 lakh crores today in terms of assets, which is pretty much where the mutual fund industry was 10 years back. So that's the opportunity really. And I can see the inflection. I think 3 years back or 5 years back, uh, infrastructure was primarily equity for infrastructure was primarily financed by foreign investors. You had 180 to 100% of the capital coming from outside. Whereas now, if you look at all of the listed InvITs, about 50% of the market cap is domestic now. So we've seen a huge amount of domestic funds come in, just like they've come into the rest of the capital markets. That inflection point is clearly there. On the demand side, therefore, we need to still work on investor education. We need to. I think AMFI is a good example, and I think we've organized ourselves also as an association and trying to do similar things in terms of educating investors, educating the ecosystem. In terms of how to look at an invite, how PAT doesn't matter, cash flow matters, and things like that, right? So that's one side. But the bigger catalyst is, or equally, the catalyst is also on the supply side. We need good quality projects coming through. We need a continuous supply of assets. If the industry has to grow, there has to be a ecosystem, not just of roads and renewables, but other sectors, as pointed out. I think that's again, I think capacity building and building that pipeline. We have the NIP, but beyond that, can we create a larger pipeline, a larger visibility to so that we can project to get to 80 lakh crore that the mutual funds are today, right? So that's the sort of.
And are you getting enough support from the retail investors? Is this
Yeah,
product
yeah,
kind of well understood and invested in by retail? Because since you mentioned
yeah,
mutual
yeah,
funds,
yeah.
that it's a retail story largely.
Correct. So yes, what we're seeing in terms of transition is today, mutual funds and private insurers are the first ones to get on board domestically. Uh, we've now seen a transition, and we continue to see a transition of HNIs and the wealth platforms getting in. I think truly retailization of this product will happen as more supply comes in. which I think
But HNIs are, so that's the first
yeah,
thing.
that's
Typically,
certainly there.
yeah.
I think a few of the laggards are our own pension ecosystem, for example, because it's an ideal product for pension. I think those are some of the entities that need a
Yet,
nudge
yeah.
to come in sort of larger sort of quantities. But yeah, but I think I
Got
can
it.
see clearly retailization.
Got it. Uh, Mr. S.K. Gupta, one question essentially is, one of the key drivers in the last 2 years for the improvement of the power sector, overall power sector, has been the improving quality of the counterparties, wherein the discoms have been, because those were really the perennially the sick person in the overall value chain, and they would really hold everyone else to ransom. We've seen in the last few years that has certainly improved, and that works across renewable or thermal or anyone. Do you see this is sustainable, or do you think this is just pushing the can down the road, and still again we will have situation where discoms will kind of start delaying in a major way, and then again the projects get into difficulty?
Look, in the short term, if you look at things appears to be relatively better. Outstandings which were discom outstandings which were in the range of approximately 1.4 lakh crores have come down to approximately 48,000 crores plus or so. So looks like a major improvement in the numbers right now. But there's something in the background which has to be seen very, very carefully. Ultimately, a discom's ability to pay will depend upon the profitability of the discom. Discom's losses on technical and commercial regions have grown up to almost 16% now, and they are not reducing. They are actually slowly growing up only. Now, if they have such heavy discounts losses on the first end, on the other hand, the cost of production and the tariffs, if you look at them, the tariffs, the cost of production is in the range of approximately 8 plus rupees, and tariffs are maybe touching 8 or slightly less than 8 right now. When the government came out with the scheme for supporting discoms through loans from long-term loans from financial institutions, one of the key conditions was that the tariff should be steadily improved. That is not happening.
But one of
Technical
the
and
things,
commercial losses.
sorry, but one of the key things has also been the whole AT&C losses coming down.
Yeah,
So
so
that's
I was
yeah.
going to come to that only. So PNC losses are high. So I think what needs to be done is a two-page strategy that should be implemented in close coordination with state discoms and the state government. One is strengthening the transmission and distribution system in a manner that reduces on transmission reduces substantially. The other is tightening the administrative controls within the state government and discoms to see that commercial losses also reduced.
Right.
The more they fall, the better will be the margins of the discoms.
Yeah. Can
And
I bring in Mr. Kulshraj? I noticed in your introduction that you've spent a fair amount of time at REC, right? And REC is really PFC and REC have been kind of entities which are supporting, these things. So, what is your sense in terms of the sustainability of this? Because that really has a direct effect on the power sector as a whole.
Thank you. I'll have to go back. I had been out of the sector since last 2 years. So, but I can tell you one thing with full conviction that the way power sector is evolving, the way energy transition is happening, the way we are reaching towards the 500 gigawatt goals of the renewable energy. Uh, I may understand the point of the renewable energy player that the discoms are not making profit. But see, if we see the ecosystem of the distribution or the power sector, profit will never come because they are the regulated entities, there are subsidies, there are cross subsidies, they are the public interface. But at the same time, we have to understand that no state will afford the darkness. So I I think we are on the path of improvement. RDSS scheme is there. We had already came through the Uday and lot of schemes, lot of initiatives government of India has taken. LPS scheme was one of that initiative wherein the government of India has ensured that the power procurement price will be given within a limited, I think, 30 days of the time. So all these initiatives were taken with a viewpoint that the generators will get their dues on time. Tariffs are increasing, yes. Regulatory assets also, if you have seen, Supreme Court has came very heavily. I think we are on the path of improvement, and AT&C losses are reducing with the help of this thing. And now the prepaid metering is also being very
Yeah,
popular.
great. Thank you. Mr. Gangadhar, it's a more philosophical question, if I were to say. The whole world and is getting into protectionist kind of a scenario. So the question is, and India finds itself at really the crossroad, because if India decides to be protectionist, then we largely are looking at only the domestic growth. And you're right, domestic growth has been domestically, we are doing very well, financial institutions are good. But if we really have to get into a developed economy, which is what the whole story of Viksit Bharat is, and need maybe 8-10% kind of a growth, this 5-6-7% growth is not. So the question is that, can we are we moving towards, and since you work in the government, you have obviously a better ringside view, are we getting into a protectionist scenario, or are we gonna be going out and compete with the Chinas and the US, to seek investments, to reduce our cost, do the innovation as Mr. SK Gupta was saying, and really take it on and take away all the customs duties and all that, which allow a lot of industries in India to kind of exist profitably.
Yeah, I know it's an interesting question, but theoretically, of course, I can say no country can actually afford to be either protectionist or, for that matter, isolationist. Protectionism is costly, and experience of many countries, including that of India, has proved, this. But while I say that, I'm also cognizant of the fact that today, some of the fundamental principles and concepts of economics actually are being challenged. You know, and then when we talk about isolationism, one, of course, cannot be isolationist in an interconnected and interdependent world. In my view, what we need is the following. Number one, uh, overexposure or over dependency on any single source or single market is risky. And everybody has realized that, since COVID. So, what we need is, as many countries have actually been talking about, is de risking and diversification. What we also need is a level playing field so that nobody can game us. And then there are tools, again, which the WTO framework actually provides for, through which we can ensure protection against unfair trade practices to protect the interests of the most vulnerable, especially the farmers or the small businesses. But it is also true that the current WTO toolkit does not have the tools for certain trade practices that did not exist at the time when those rules were actually being written or framed. And unfortunately, WTO has not been able to upgrade its toolkit. That is also a fact. So enhancing, then the third aspect is actually what I call is enhancing competitiveness and productivity. Earlier he mentioned about innovation. Then, of course, others talked about reforms. And India's policy actually has been a combination of many of this, effective use of the free trade agreements, diversification of supply chains. We've been part of many global initiatives, since COVID. Then use of trade remedies, whenever we are faced with, trade barriers or unfair trade practices. And of course, the last is undertaking deep reforms. I also would like to take this opportunity to underline that that government alone cannot actually do this. I mean, private sector too needs to join hands. For instance, when it comes to achieving diversification or in utilizing the benefits of free trade agreements, or even for that matter, achieving competitiveness or innovation. So, in my view, it has to be a whole of the country and whole of the society approach. And that is when I think if we all of us work together, we can actually get to the goal of Vikasit Bharat by 2047. That's what I would like to say.
Great, thank you. I'm fully aware that I'm holding all of you, away from your dinner. So I will, stop the moderated questions, and I would open the floor for any questions that you may have. Yes, I think we've. Can you please pass on the mic?
Good evening. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. So before I throw a question, which is quite specific and a little tough, but I'm asking this as a non-technocrat because
Maybe it will be good if you introduce yourself, please.
my name is Hemant Batra. I'm a lawyer by profession, more outside court than inside. Uh, Firstly, let me congratulate CareEdge for curating, a very thoughtful and timely conversation. Your team does deserve a high credit rating for bringing together, an exceptional mix of policymakers and industry leaders and even thinkers. And thanks to the panelist and even Dr. Nageshwaran, who's not here for the insights. So my question is, which I'm asking is one which I'm carrying from the different institutions which I visit and the young minds I face. Uh, the question is that, as India accelerates its, transition into sustainable and inclusive growth, in your view, what is that one, structural change, be it in policy, mindset, uh, or markets, let's say, which can define this decade to be India's decade rather than another opportunity missed? Yeah.
Good
Any
question.
of the panelists
Yeah.
can respond.
Gangadhar, since you are the policy guy, can I give this difficult question to you?
Since this is actually sort of a wish list,
Uh,
I think I would say that we should listen to people from
the
outside
industry.
the
Okay.
government,
Okay.
so that what
So
is
it's a
that
wish
they
list.
would like to see,
Note down
change in the
he's noting.
government.
So you kindly note down the wishes, but
No, I think I sort of averred to it in one of my earlier answers. I think centrally we've done fantastically well, whether it's in terms of policy, whether it's in terms of building institutions. My wish is that that gets replicated at the state, at the municipality, at various levels, down to local government. I think that uh, I think is the magic that will really, because then the growth doesn't have one engine; it has so many engines, and that's, I think, one of the key reasons why China has done so well. Right? They have
yeah,
such entrepreneurial
local
spirit
governments. Yeah.
at local governments. I think that is the key sort of capacity building, in my opinion. Obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Having been a state government and a urban local body analyst myself, uh, I think the capability of what we see as the bureaucrats and other people at the central government is very different. There will be very few people. It's not that those bureaucrats are not good,
Not
but
that
there are
good.
very, very few people who are staffing there. So we just need to add more people and give them maybe targets to kind of do. Anything else you want to add, Mr. Kulshresh? You mentioned about the capacity
I
building,
agree with
anyways.
his
Yeah.
wish list, and we as an institution is working on his
Yeah,
wish list.
you are working. I remember you told me. Anyways, you lent to the state government, so that will be good if more projects come through.
Two things I like to say here. One is, of course, I think something called belief in our capability. We have demonstrated this enough now in the last 10 years or so that yes, we can and we are doing it. And we are doing it in areas where we always thought that we were laggards at one stage of time. To think of India as becoming a major export hub for armaments of the latest competency is a big proof. The other is the way we have performed in space. The other thing is, which I find, which which is a very bad system in India, is that one is in the government, the other is in the opposition. The opposition always feels that their job is only to oppose everything and anything. I think some sort of a constructive approach amongst people when it comes to development of the country. If that thing starts building up much more strongly, people can have difference of opinion on policies and on on various issues as such. But when it comes to development of the country and taking it to the next level of generation, if all the hands pull together their resources, I think we are very much there. We are very much there in that case, sir.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from the audience, or is the dinner calling? Okay. So I think we bring the panel discussion to a close. Thanks a lot for my fellow panelists. It was a pleasure to kind of moderate this discussion. Thank you.
A heartfelt thank you to our panelists for an enriching discussion and their valuable insights, and also to Sachin for steering through a thought provoking conversation. I would request our panelists to kindly remain on the dais as we express our gratitude to you all. I would first request Sachin to please felicitate Mr. Gangadhar. May I now call upon Repti to felicitate Mr. Kulsheshtra? I would now like to call upon Sabyasachi, who's the Senior Director with CareEdge Ratings, to felicitate Mr. Shekhar. And finally, requesting Pankaj, who's the Director, CareEdge BD, to please felicitate Mr. Gupta. As we conclude this insightful and prestigious evening, I would first request you all to please scan the QR code on the placards kept on your tables. There is a CareEdge WhatsApp channel. You can follow us for regular updates and industry reports. Also, may I now invite my colleague Pankaj Sharma, who's the Director with Business Development at CareEdge Ratings, to deliver a vote of thanks. Pankaj leads the North region for corporate, infrastructure, ESG, and global scale ratings.
Thanks, Ravleen. Good evening, everyone. As the saying goes, great minds discuss ideas. And today truly has been a gathering of great minds sharing perspective on India's economic future. On behalf of CareEdge Ratings, it is my honor to deliver the word of thanks at the close of this insightful and inspiring session. First and foremost, our deepest gratitude to our chief guest, Dr. V. Ananta Nageshwaran, Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, for gracing us with his presence and sharing his visionary outlook on India's growth trajectory. His words beautifully connected macroeconomic vision with the ground realities, setting a thought provoking tone that truly resonated with everyone in the room. A heartfelt thanks to Mr. P.S. Gangadhar, Joint Secretary, Minister of Economic Affairs, for his deep insights on trade diplomacy and global economic linkages. Your perspective on how India is navigating the evolving trade landscape, from managing tariff challenges to the evolving FTAs, brought valuable clarity on India's strategic direction in a rapidly changing global environment. Mr. Sanjay Kulshrestha, Chairman and Managing Director, HUDCO, thank you for your pragmatic insights on infrastructure financing. Your thoughts on funding opportunities beyond traditional sectors and your candid reflections on policy challenges and the innovating financing avenues were especially enriching. Mr. Vinay Shekhar, CEO, Cube Highways Invit, your remarks on evolution of India's road sector, the transformative role of InvITs, and the roadmap for deepening domestic and retail participation into the infrastructure investments provided valuable investor and operational insights. And Mr. S.K. Gupta, Executive Director, MP Energy Transition, your perspective on building a truly Atmanirbhar renewable energy ecosystem and on managing sectoral challenges such as discom health and supply chain dependencies added immense depth to our discussion on sustainable growth. Each of you brought unique expertise and thought leadership on the table, making the discussion truly multidimensional, data driven, and forward looking. A sincere thank you to the senior leadership team at CareEdge Group for continuously driving our mission to enhance transparency, foster innovation, and position Care as a thought leader shaping India's economic narrative. A special word of appreciation to our MC Ravleen, who conducted the proceedings with such warmth, grace, and professionalism, ensuring that the energy in the room never dipped for a moment. We would also like to give a special thanks to His Excellency High Commission Bannon and His Excellency official from Embassy of Luxembourg to grace us with their presence here. And finally, to all our distinguished guests, industry leaders, colleagues, partners, and the members of the media, your presence and engagement makes these dialogues meaningful and impactful. As we close, let me leave you just with one thought. Progress is born when ideas meet purpose, and the conversations that we have are the spark that light the way forward. On behalf of the entire CareEdge family, thank you once again for being here at CareEdge Conversation 2025. Together, let's continue powering India's growth and shaping tomorrow. Thank you so much. We now invite you all to have cocktails and dinners as we continue the dialogue in a more informal setting. Thank you, guys. And parallelly, I may request the entire CareEdge team to come on the stage for the photograph with the dignitaries.